Wow, Mario Kart World has way more content than we thought. Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how Mario Kart World is a very big game. And I thought this would be a good discussion to have right now because as of this recording, we are less than 6 days away from the launch of Nintendo Switch 2 and Mario Kart World, and perhaps by the time you actually see this video, it might just be 5 days away, or even less. But since the initial tease of Mario Kart World on January 16th when they gave us the first look trailer for Switch 2, we have learned so much about this game in a variety of different ways. The next big trailer during the big Switch 2 Direct, what we learned from the Mario Kart World Direct, what we learned from the Treehouse events, what we learned from all the different Switch 2 Experience events and press events and all the different Nintendo Today updates and the Ask Developer series and the commercials. There's so much about Mario Kart World that we've learned from different places, and there's a lot of information that a lot of people have missed because not a lot of it has been advertised across the board to everyone. And there's even been some recent things that I've noticed that I think are helping to paint an even more compelling picture of how big of a deal this game actually is. It's very sizable. And what I find extra interesting about having this conversation is that Mario Kart World is a highly priced game at $80 USD. That's certainly been a talking point when it comes to this game, and it was an even bigger talking point when we go back to the beginning of April. And many of us were looking towards the Mario Kart World Direct to perhaps see some sort of justification for the price tag here, especially because we had multiple Nintendo representatives point us towards this Direct, suggesting that we'd be learning a lot more about this game in the presentation. Except what's funny about this Mario Kart World Direct that we got, it was actually one of the more underwhelming Direct presentations we've gotten for a game. At face value, we didn't learn that much. Now, I think upon closer inspection, there were some really good details there, but overall, to the general masses, the Mario Kart World Direct did not do a good job of justifying the price tag. And the fact of the matter is, only time is going to truly tell if that price is justified. The laws of supply and demand, depending on how many people actually buy the game and decide it's worth it. But after analyzing every little detail about this game over the last few months in lead up to this launch, what has become clear to me is that this game has way more content than people expected, that this game is huge, and I really want to dive into just how big and significant this game actually is. Because I think once you put it into perspective, it's pretty amazing. So that's what we're getting into today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out I am now aiming for a new goal of 60,000 subscribers. So if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. So for starters here, I would like to go over this relatively small chunk of the Ask Developer series on Mario Kart World because I think it will really help to put into perspective just how big this game could be. I see. So you had to get creative in order to put together this interconnected world. On the other hand, I'm sure you've included lots of new gameplay elements in this game. Can you tell us how you went about making those? Jikumaru. Mario Kart is a series of racing games that has placed a lot of emphasis on drifting over the years, so courses were designed with lots of bends. But in this game, since you are driving around an interconnected world, we needed to make it fun to drive not only around corners, but also in a straight line. And let me provide a bit of context in terms of what's going on right now. They were talking about how they wanted to go into a new direction for Mario Kart because they felt that with Mario Kart 8, they've essentially mastered that style of gameplay. They needed to think of a way to evolve the series, so they decided to go in the open world direction, an interconnected world where you have these varying points of interest and you drive from one point to another. The Grand Prix are connected, interconnected. But a big part of Mario Kart is the drifting and going around these tight turns. However, because it's an interconnected world and you have to get from one point to another that's somewhat far away, you do need to also incorporate more straight lines. So they need to think about how can they make this fun for the game. Continuing on, make it fun to drive in a straight line? How did you approach that? Jikumaru. For example, when going from point A to point B, we tried placing lots of bends along the way like we always do. But with too many bends, you lose sight of your destination. Then your goal of traveling from point A to point B becomes more difficult. That said, driving for ages down a straight road isn't much fun either. So we figured that we were lacking some kind of gameplay mechanic for straight roads. And that's where the idea of some of the game's new elements such as rail ride and wall ride came from. the development team collectively referred to these new features as tricks. And so what I find fascinating about this is that when trying to solve this problem of making an interconnected world fun and to make sense within the world of Mario Kart, they developed, or rather expanded, the mechanic of drifting by integrating tricks with both wall and rail riding. Yabuki. If everywhere is just straight roads, it's going to feel the same no matter where you drive. With such a vast world, we thought it'd be a shame if you were just driving in a straight line the whole time. Then, we found a hint from a book that said skateboards create infinite possibilities in a city with just a single piece of wood. Tricks can open up a multitude of driving possibilities for just a single wall or dirt track. We thought it would be fun to be able to drive in completely different ways just based on the player's imagination. So we made the gameplay more varied. For tricks like rail ride and the wall ride, we referenced extreme sports like skateboarding, snowboarding, and BMX. And so here Jukumaru's talking about how they took inspiration from skateboarding and how that can create an infinite amount of possibilities based on the player's imagination. And I've mentioned this before in a few different videos, but when I think about how they expanded Mario Kart to an open world, an interconnected world, and now we also incorporate these trick mechanics with wall and rail riding, and how a lot of it comes down to your imagination, it really does remind me a lot of Breath of the Wild. Because in Breath of the Wild, it is an open world, and the Zelda team had to think about how you make this open world interesting and fun to play in. As did the Mario Kart team. They came up with different solutions, but ultimately each game has different tools for the player that vary based on your imagination and what you decide to do with the world. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are huge games, but they are huge in part because the games vary so much based off your own imagination and what you decide to do within that world. And Mario Kart World has a little bit of that as well. Continuing on though, Yabuki. I think these tricks will really give players a chance to use their imagination as they come up with ideas like, I'm gonna drive up that wall, let me use that pillar, or can I ride that guardrail or power line? This speaks to that point I was getting at in regards to creativity. There's a variety of different things you're going to be able to do, and we may find ways that developers did not even intend. Continuing though, I see. But if you give players more moves, then you also need to design courses that account for them, right? How many courses are in the game? Yabuki. In this game, you don't just race on the courses. The areas between courses are also used for racing. So it's as if there are courses spread out all over the world, and if you were to add up all the possible variations, it would easily exceed 100. This point alone, I think, is greatly underestimated by many, or perhaps not even known by many, because how many people actually take the time to read the interviews? A small group of people. Mario Kart World is huge, and there is so much to explore in this game. There are so many variations to the races. As Yabuki says here, it easily exceeds 100. So having gone through this part of the interview, what I want everyone listening to keep in mind here is that as we go point by point, there's even more factors to sort of keep in mind in terms of how much depth there actually is to this game. We've already talked about how Mario Kart World is an interconnected world. There are over 100 possible variations, and they had to design all these different variations, all these different interconnected tracks, the intermission tracks, the actual main tracks, everything with the new mechanics in mind, being able to do different things in different areas. Can you get on that power line? Can you get on that wall? Can you get on that ceiling or roof? They made an expansive, vast world that you can explore in a variety of ways, more so than any other prior Mario Kart game by a substantial margin, and there's also a lot more to explore. To just simply look at the 30 tracks that are in the game, or at least from what they show of the map, and then say that this game is smaller than prior Mario Kart games, because usually a big Mario Kart game might start off with 32 tracks and this only has 30, that's really unfair because there's all these different roads and such in between. But it really goes well beyond that. So I would like to go back to the Mario Kart World Direct because there's something there that I recently sort of realized is perhaps a bigger deal than we've all realized. So hear me out here. When they talk about versus races, they make mention that there are other possible ways than what you can find in the Grand Prix or Knockout Tour. And I thought that to be interesting, but it didn't really make the connection for what they were showing on screen. So pay attention here. In this versus race, they are actually customizing what they're going to do for the Grand Prix. Notice how you pick one track and then there are arrows next to the other names of the tracks here on this little list. But as the footage continues, you see that you are choosing the next path. So basically what you're doing is you are choosing the direction you're going to go into for the second race. And as you see around this track, there are like 6 different options here. And so presumably once you pick the second race, you can then pick anything around that track as well, where there will be a variety of tracks all around it in a circle of some kind, and then again as well until you form the 4 for your Grand Prix. And so there's actually some significant customization options here. As they said in the direct, you can create variations that are more than what you see in Grand Prix or Knockout Tour. But this is where things start to get a bit crazier. Some of you may have heard of the recent news that we've basically discovered a reverse mode in Mario Kart World. There's been a lot of debate if there's going to be a mirror mode in Mario Kart World, and that part is still up for debate, but perhaps it seems less likely now because we've essentially discovered a reverse mode. There was a commercial of Mario Kart World, and in there we see footage of a race in Super Mario Bros. Circuit, and we can see the minimap on screen. But we've also seen from the treehouse footage the minimap of Super Mario Bros. Circuit, and from what we can tell, the minimaps are flipped, basically telling us that in the commercial they are racing in reverse. So it looks like, either intentionally or inadvertently, it's not clear, Nintendo has revealed a reverse mode. And so what this likely means, every track in this game, every main track, has a reverse mode, essentially doubling the amount of content here. And it doesn't work quite like mirror mode where everything's literally just mirrored. When it's in reverse, there may need to be some additional customizations. Which brings me to a whole other point here. So we know there's at least 1, maybe 2 tracks that have an alternate sort of race. Crown City has more than 1 track within it. And these areas are so big, you can have entirely different tracks within the same setting. It's done at a different time of day, a different part of the city, so even though it's in one location, it is actually more than 1 track. And there's a lot of speculation that the same will also apply for Peach's Castle as well. Based off the footage we've seen from Rainbow Road, it seems likely that there's going to be another Grand Prix that at least ties again to Peach's Castle. But we've also seen that you race through some areas in Grand Prix mode and also Knockout Tour in totally different ways. One location I've pointed out is Spaceport. Where you race through in Spaceport in Grand Prix mode is completely different from where you race through in Knockout Tour. And the giant Mecha DK appears in a completely different location and moves in a completely different direction in Knockout Tour versus what he does in Grand Prix. And so what this shows is that between modes, there's a great deal of customization here. And it's actually gotten me to wonder, okay, well, in prior Mario Kart games, you have your Grand Prix mode, your time trials, your versus race, and just multiplayer. Mario Kart World has all of that, but it also has Knockout Tour, an entirely new mode, and it also has free roam. And so they have to customize the tracks and you utilize them in different ways in Grand Prix mode, in Knockout Tour, and also versus race. They change these tracks around per mode, and now when we also consider there's a reverse mode, that's another layer of changing things around here. The tracks are not the same per mode, there are changes. Like for example, in free roam mode, nothing's blocked off. When you're in Grand Prix mode, Super Mario Bros. Circuit, there are certain places you can't go, they change around the track. Or in the case of Spaceport, not only do you race through an entirely different part of it, depending on the mode, but the boss of the area, Mecha DK, does something completely different. So I then wonder, what will happen when we race through Spaceport in free roam mode? What's Mecha DK doing then? Which then has me wonder if it may tie into a P-Switch mission. We've seen a few P-Switch missions already, and every couple days Nintendo shows us a new one, and there does seem to be a fair bit of variety. They look very fun, and this is something that helps to fill up the open world. And so I wonder, could there be some P-Switch missions that will have boss fights or unique interactions with different characters like maybe Mecha DK? It remains to be seen. Perhaps Nintendo's not revealing that kind of information because they don't want to show off everything there is to the missions mode in the free roam. But what we have seen with the missions is that there are missions where you can interact with their characters, such as this Shy Guy mission here where you literally join their snowboarding race. So there could be something to do with other boss characters or enemies throughout the world, perhaps even including Mecha DK. But something crazy that I pointed out a few weeks ago in a video about Spaceport is that there's actually an entire other section of Spaceport that we do not race through in Grand Prix mode, that we do not race through in Knockout Tour, but it's an entire different section. As I'm showing here, when you see at the end of the treehouse footage, when they're racing through at the end of the race, Mario's flying down, you can see that you actually can race through or drive through from the top of the rocket ship to the bottom and vice versa. And I theorize that there may be some P-switch missions along these areas, but it just sort of goes to show just how much there is to these big points of interest on the map. There are different potential tracks here, more than what we've seen in Grand Prix or Knockout Tour. Now, will they actually be dedicated races or just things you can explore in free roam mode? Probably just things you can explore in free roam mode, but to me it's kind of mind-boggling. You can climb from the very bottom all the way to the top of the rocket ship in a completely different section that we have not seen in any other mode so far. And what also makes things interesting here is that maybe this Spaceport section I'm talking about here is actually just another variant for a race. I don't want to assume that, I'm saying it as simply a possibility, and it becomes more interesting when we consider that there have been theories of other tracks having variations. There's this theory that Peach Beach actually has 2 different variations as well, and on top of that there's another theory that Cheep Cheep Falls may also have a different variation. So it may be the case that these tracks could have different variations, and this might tie into this reverse mode that has apparently been leaked or very subtly revealed by Nintendo. Perhaps it's not so much a reverse mode, but an alternate mode where you race through these tracks in different ways, which might tie into this whole other area we're seeing with Spaceport that doesn't seem to have anything to do with a Grand Prix or a Knockout Tour, at least from what we've seen so far. But what's also exciting about this premise of there being a reverse mode, I think it strengthens the notion of us seeing another mode in this game, and that's 200cc. You see, Mario Kart Tour, the most recent Mario Kart offering, introduced reverse mode, but it also still had 200cc. Mirror mode, not so much. It may be the case that mirror mode is a thing of the past and the replacement is reverse mode. However, the other implication is that 200cc is still something that's a mainstay in the Mario Kart series. We've seen it in the last few Mario Kart offerings. I honestly would be very surprised if 200cc is not in this game, especially considering that the way the tracks have been designed, they're far wider and larger now, which actually would accommodate 200cc even better. The thing about 200cc with Mario Kart 8, it was not designed initially with 200cc in mind. That was an afterthought addition. It was a post-launch update. So this time with Mario Kart World, we're seeing the tracks appear to have been designed with faster speeds in mind, so it would be very surprising if 200cc is not also a part of the equation here. And so I just want everyone listening to consider everything that's going on. These tracks change depending on the mode. There may be reverse mode, there may be 200cc, there may be track variants, and then even within a single track in a particular mode, there are a variety of different ways to race about it, more shortcuts and ways to go in comparison to any other iteration of Mario Kart. So these tracks have far more complexity to them in a variety of ways, and there are so many different variations you can do beyond just what you see from Grand Prix mode or Knockout Tour. So when you start to think about this, the amount of possibilities here is staggering. It's far more than any other Mario Kart game by a substantial margin here. But wait, there's more. So some other things we have learned since the Mario Kart World Direct. We've gotten it confirmed that the binoculars are accessible in the free roam. You can go into them and allow you to look up from high up and scan the environment for varying points of interest. It's a great way to see the beautiful world and also help you to find other places to go. But then we also know about the warp pipes. They are interactive, they are accessible. You could simply drive into them and it takes you to the other end of the warp pipe, and these warp pipes are literally everywhere here. So that's really going to help traversal of this map both more efficient and fun. But something else that everyone has started to talk about lately over these last few days is that every time we get an update from Nintendo Today, we see another little bit of clip or footage of a mission or a binocular view, and we can see Nabbit doing something in some sort of small campsite off into the distance in these different parts of the Mario Kart world. And so given that we keep seeing him in these different parts of the Mario Kart world, it has me wondering, and many others as well, what is going on with Nabbit here? is there some sort of unique interaction or quest we can do with Nabbit? And I think a lot of us are leaning in the direction of yes, there is, because why else would he just be there in every different part of the world? If it was just once, maybe twice, okay. But the fact that we keep seeing him in these different parts, it feels like there's something going on here. And it takes me back to something else we heard from the Mario Kart World Direct where they were talking about free roam. How they talked about how, yeah, you can find stamps, how you can press the question blocks, how there are these medallions in the P-Switch missions, but they also said there's more. So we know about the warp pipes, we know about the binoculars, and now we see Nabbit as well. Not to mention something else we know about, there are vending machines, and of course there's Yoshi's. When I say Yoshi's, I mean Yoshi's drive-through chain that's all throughout. That's something we can find even in the races themselves, but it's just another point of interest that we can interact with throughout the world. And then when we also consider that we've already seen some P-Switch missions where we do interact with the characters in the world, there seems to be a little bit more going on with the free roam in Mario Kart World. It's more than what people were thinking. And so when you consider all of this, before we really see everything Nintendo has to offer about this game once it comes out less than a week from now, it already is apparent that Mario Kart World has way more content than we thought following the Mario Kart World Direct. And so how much more are we going to learn about this game? Even if there's nothing more, which I doubt, I think there is more. For example, perhaps more characters. Considering everything we've gone over, there is a staggering amount of customization and variations to the races. And just one other little thing I'll point out there, because I've seen some people talk about it. People have been speaking ill of the battle mode, and I understand there's just the balloon battle and the coins that they've shown off. Maybe there's more. I am not assuming there's more, but even if it's just those two modes, I do think it's at least better than how things started with Mario Kart 8, because if you remember with Mario Kart 8 back on Wii U, there were not even dedicated tracks for the battle mode. At least this time they have dedicated unique arenas for the battle mode, which a lot of us didn't think they would do. A lot of us were thinking that they might actually integrate the battle mode into the open world, because that's the big part of this game. They decided not to do that, and instead they made sure to bring in new arenas specifically for the battle mode, which I find to be kind of funny. But what do you all think? What do you make of Mario Kart World and how much content it has? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.